I thank the two panelists. We understand that the election process includes the campaign, Election Day, and the transition to a new government, and it's not a single event. But reports as recent as yesterday have the estimates that up to 4 million citizens are unable to vote for varying reasons. That's more than 10% of the 33.5 million people officially eligible to vote. I'd like to know on what will we base our assessment about whether this election is credible, transparent, and inclusive. I've heard that it will depend solely on whether the Burmese people accept the election. But I've also heard that we will make the call based on what we observe. Could you provide any clarification on that, either of you? And what are we prepared to do if the election doesn't meet our benchmarks? Mr. Russ, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're absolutely right in that the United States will call it as we see it. We will make an assessment based on the facts, and we will calibrate our response to the elections based on our assessment of how credible, how transparent, how inclusive, how free and fair we think it was. We're not wearing rose-colored glasses here. We are very mindful of the fundamental structural defects that I mentioned. There's nothing fair about reserving 25% of the legislature for the military. There's nothing fair about disenfranchising the white card holders, the Rohingyas. But Aung San Suu Kyi, the NLD, the parties have decided to contest the election on that basis, mindful of those defects. So we will assess, we will make our assessment based on what we hear and see, based on what we are told by Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD, the other parties, the election observers. It's important to note that not only IFES, but IRI, NDI, Carter Center, EU are there in substantial numbers, as are many thousands of domestic observers. We'll listen to the Burmese media and we'll listen to the Burmese people. We'll apply these criteria, and we will also look at the morning after. It is critically important, Mr. Chairman, that all parties, including the military, accept the results of the polling and then proceed with the process of selecting a parliament and government formation, as well as the choosing of a president in a way that's fully transparent. Our ability to assist the new Burmese government, let alone to look at relaxation of sanctions or other measures, will depend on our assessment of the integrity of the overall process. Thank you.
Mr. Stivers, do you have any thoughts?
I think Assistant Secretary Russell explained it very well. There's obvious challenges with the election, structural challenges before the voting even begins. But the outcome of the contested seats are extremely important. And as we said before, there's an open and vibrant and competitive process over those seats. The challenges are daunting in terms of trying to administer election in a country with 53 million people, limited experience with campaigns and democracy, and certainly the voter lists needed a lot of work, and we've been working with our partners, IFES, to try to improve those. And I've been there with IFES in Burma to see how that's done. Realize that there's 90 political parties, over 100 different languages. You have conflicts in many of the areas where we hope voting will take place. And so the challenges of administering an election in this context is extremely difficult, and we are working with the UEC and our partners there to make it as transparent and credible as possible.
And Mr. Stivers, with the monsoon season ending, international observers and organizations expect Rohingya boat flights to resume. What preparations has the government of Burma taken in advance of this? And are other regional countries such as Thailand and Malaysia expressing concerns about the possibility of migrant boats landing on their shores? Has there been a wider ASEAN-level response to this? And how can the United States hold Burma accountable for the welfare of its own people, given that Burma does not recognize Rohingyas as Burmese citizens?
There's a lot of questions there. I'll try to get them specifically. In terms of the issue with the Rohingya and the Muslim minorities not being able to vote, that's obviously a concern and a reason why the election will fall short. And certainly we're providing assistance to the Rohingya there in Rakhine State. We're providing assistance as much as possible in some of the conflict communities, but certainly conducting an election in those areas is extremely difficult based on those realities. In terms of the flooding, we have provided a significant amount of assistance to help the most vulnerable people who've been affected. And as that moves forward, we will try to make sure that assistance continues.
Do we think that their government is prepared to deal with this, Mr. Russell?
To your earlier question, Mr. Chairman, we're working intensively with ASEAN as a group. I was in Kuala Lumpur 2 weeks ago for discussions on regional issues and raised the issue of irregular migration as the rainy season ends. We're also dealing directly with governments, in the first instance with the government of Burma, and urging them to accelerate their efforts in Rakhine State to expand access by humanitarian organizations to facilitate the peaceful return of Rohingyas and IDPs from camps to their homes, and in the meantime to protect their security and to work on creating economic opportunities. We're also working bilaterally with the concerned countries in the region, specifically Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. Secretary Kerry met with the Indonesian and the Malaysian foreign ministers over the last few weeks, and our effort there continues.
Thank you. Chairman Royce.